Now, I want to ask you a question about Gavin's doe. Do you think when you first saw it that he shot it in the heart? The majority of people that saw that video thought he shot it in the heart. When they found out he hit it in the liver, they were in disbelief. What I'm going to want to do is explain to you how that happened in a very unorthodox way. I'm planning on using a plate. I'm going to use a bowl. And I'm going to use a broom to be able to show you why his deer was liver shot and not heart shot. Sounds crazy? Well, let's jump in and find out. Okay, the first thing I want to do is I want us to take a look at a deer that I cut out of cardboard that is standing upright with its head up, and one that has its head down and it's feeding. Some of the points I want you to notice is this. This orange line, this horizontal line here, shows the highest point on the deer here is its shoulder blade. We go back on the back of the deer feeding, it's back on its rump or back on its hip. That's the highest point. Now let's take a look at other horizontal lines. If you come down to the belly, you will see the belly here is level, and then this is actually the sternum line. Then it dips down to where the belly comes up. On younger deer and deer that are thinner, it will come here, and then it will angle all the way up. Older, mature, more northern deer, deer that have a lot of food in their bellies, this will come here, and instead of ascending up, it will descend down into a round bowl, okay? Now let's go and take a look at the deer over here, which is feeding. From the back line, instead of it being level, you see this angle, how it descends down to where the shoulder blade is actually protruded and is almost like a hump sticking up on the back part. As a sculptor, these are the little things I study. Like right there is the dip. Here it transitions and it comes down to the head. Okay? Now when we go to the belly, you will see the belly line is coming down at a steep angle like this, and then the belly ends up having more of a round pouch here. Now, Gavin's deer in Texas did not have that round pouch. That's kind of it's typical from a lot of deer, but so I kind of over accent that because I'm wanting to show anatomically the difference of where the sternum is and where the belly is behind the sternum. The other thing I want you to see is how far down its brisket hangs below where its leg is, as opposed to here where the brisket is basically on a straight line from the belly here, and then it ascends, starting to end up coming up. There's a huge difference here, and this is going to come into helping explain why Gavin ended up hitting the liver and not the heart. Okay? Okay, now we're going to take a look at the front legs to show you by using this broom how it affects the deer's legs when a deer goes from this position upright till it goes to this position over here with its head down. Now, if you take a look at this broom here and figure this would be the legs of the deer, you set this up right on the top there with the top of its shoulder blade. If that deer wants to have its head down, its whole body cannot lower itself because this would prevent it from coming down, okay? So in other words, if I stayed on that same orange line there, I came over here to this here, you take a look at how much higher that shoulder blade should be, but it's not, it comes down. So one of the things we're going to talk about is what anatomically takes place in the deer where the shoulder is allowed to drop, okay, versus it staying in place, okay? And I'm just using the broom to illustrate that the broom is stiff and cannot bend, but God has the deer set up with joints so they are flexible and they don't bend at all, but they can twist, they can turn, they can flex, they can pivot to be able to accomplish what we want, okay? Okay, now I want to talk about the position of the liver in the body of the deer. So the first thing I want to say is, let's get a few facts down. Number one, the liver is on the right-hand side. Gavin shot the deer on the right-hand side. Number two, the liver is attached on the inside of the right side. In the middle of the deer, the liver is attached to the diaphragm. What this bowl and this plate represent are the diaphragm. Now, the reason I chose a bowl and a plate was one, to get your attention, but because the shape of these illustrate a point. When you breathe out, when you exhale, your diaphragm is pushed forward and it's in a dome shape. The liver sits on the outside of the diaphragm, and it follows whatever the shape of the diaphragm is. When you breathe in, this diaphragm pulls out, and instead of being dome shaped or bowl shaped, it flattens out, and it's more the shape of a plate. And so the shape of your liver can change in the deer from the shape of it being on the inside of a bowl where it's shaped like this. So on the inside of the deer like this, it's going to be more broadside, versus a plate like this. When it breathes in, the ribs come out, the diaphragm pulls back, the liver is going to be more at an angle. It's going to be less broadside. It's going to give you a smaller target, and it's going to be able to go backwards. Okay? So, to illustrate that, I will just show you that if this is the diaphragm inside the deer like this liver is a flat edge on the inside like this, and it goes at an angle from this underneath the last vertebrae down to the sternum. That is the curvature, that how the liver sits in there. Inside that, if it fits in the middle like this is showing you what you would have as it is pushed forward. Okay? As the diaphragm is pushed forward. As it comes back, the liver here at an angle like this is not going to have as much width for you to be able to hit, because it's going to be flatter this way. Now this point is very important. You will see two different people hit the deer in different places, and yet they'll end up hitting the liver in the same place. And that is because the liver is attached to the diaphragm moves, and it's in different places based upon the breathing process. Now in Gavin's situation, there is a third factor besides inhalation, exhalation, of showing where his diaphragm was, which means where the liver is. And it has to do, the next analogy is to deal with using a pregnant lady as an example. My wife, who's filming this right now, when she was pregnant, she had a hard time breathing. Now, why did she have a hard time breathing? Because the baby is so big inside her belly that it put pressure on the diaphragm, that when she breathed in, the diaphragm could not pull down enough to bring enough air in. So she's always short of breath. But this is the third factor as far as why he hit this deer in the liver and not in the heart. That's very important to be able to understand. Okay? Okay, now we're going to talk about the devil's triangle. The devil's triangle is formed by the shoulder bones. The shoulder bones consist of the scapula, the humerus. The joint where they meet together is called the glenohumeral joint, and this is what you see on a mounted deer that sticks out the farthest, or they call it the shoulder ball. And then this is very important down here, that it's elbow, or it's called its olecranon. Now, the triangle, and it's my term, the devil's triangle, and we're dealing with this on a deer that's standing upright. Okay, so if you take a look at this here, as a general rule, now again, this is a general rule, the legs move, but a general rule, if a deer is standing there broadside and its legs are straight down, the back bottom of the scapula here on top is in a direct horizontal line with the olecranon in the bottom. The reason you don't see that on the live animals as much is there's a big tuft of fur that's here, where this is rounded and has meat over it. But if you cut those all away, you'll see how they line up. And the triangle is formed between the olecranon, the bottom point of the triangle, to the midpoint of the triangle, the glenohumeral joint, going up here to the rear of the bottom of the scapula, and then back down here like this. So now I'm going to put this on the target. This lines up right below the bottom tip of the heart. The scapula, this is on magnets here. That goes, see, this is designed in sculpture to go back farther, so I'll hold it away a little bit, okay, like this. That is about how that sets, exactly like that in a live animal. So again, the triangle, Doris, if you'll point it out, starts from the top to the bottom, along the line in through here, and then all the way back up again. And the reason I call this a triangle is, and the devil's triangle is, this moves. And people try to shoot the deer in the heart all the time. And as you're going to see with Gavin's deer, it's a tricky thing, because as the deer moves, these bones move. This scapula is not attached to anything. Well, it is attached, but it's attached by muscle and tendons and ligaments. that are very big that you know on a roast of a deer, shoulder roast, that's what attaches it. There's not a joint, a ball in a socket like it is here, or this joint that's down here like this. Okay? So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at this on the deer that's bent over feeding and see what the difference is. But remember, there's 9 inches between the olecranon and the rear edge of the scapula. And that bird in the background, that is a loon that makes the most beautiful sound in the world. Let it go. Glory to God. It's beautiful. Now an elk will be a better sound come September. We live right across from a lake, and we hear the loons quite frequently, but it's from about a half mile away. So when they fly over us like that and they serenade us like that, we give praise to God. It's just wonderful. Wait all winter for the loons to come back so we can hear them do that. I want you to see the distance between the heart and the liver here. Now remember, this simulates the liver, but the liver moves depending on where it is attached to the diaphragm. So if we go back here, and I set back there like that, I'm wanting you to notice very particular where the glenohumeral joint is, where the olecranon is in relationship to the heart, in relationship to the liver. Because remember, we're trying to answer the question, how in the world did he hit the liver and not the heart? And I want you to see again, the scapula sits up right up along the top. Okay? Because what we're going to do is we're going to go from here, we're going to go over to the deer that's feeding, and we're going to start seeing what the difference is of a feeding deer that's hunched up with its legs spread. Okay? Okay, now what I want to show you on this deer feeding down, we're not talking about the shoulder bones now, we're talking about the location of the liver. Do you see how I drew the stomach in there? I just drew the stomach as a big ball, and you see where the liver comes in like this, and it actually rounds out, it follows the shape of the ball. Do you see these dotted lines that are right here? Those dotted lines represent the liver shape of this when the deer was standing upright in the first deer there, okay? The reason I kick this forward is this. When you bend over like this, you bend your body over, your stomach bulges and it compresses. And what it will actually do, depending on how much food's in your stomach, it will actually push the diaphragm, which the liver's behind the diaphragm and the stomach's behind it. It literally pushes that forward. And I've got a video that I'll be able to show that we'll put in here about my favorite wild deer that I fed for years. She got hit by a car last year. I did an examination on her, which was really hard, but she was dead. So now she was a deer. She wasn't I called her yearling. And what it showed on that there is she was hit by a car, she bloated. So like, I don't want to compare a bloated deer to a pregnant woman or me being fat, but the principle being that the stomach got enlarged behind the diaphragm, and that pushed the diaphragm so far forward, and I can show you this in the video, the liver was almost touching the heart. Now that's an extreme example because it was really bloated, so it was extreme, but it shows the principle of how close the liver came to the heart. Another point in the liver to show is this. Look how far back the liver goes on the top, and look how far forward it comes on the bottom. So in other words, the point I'm making here is when the deer bend down, if they have food in their stomach and they're large, and depending on the breathing process, that liver can get kicked forward more, okay, than it normally would be if it was standing upright and it didn't have food in its belly. That's why somebody shoots one here, man, they died, shot him in the liver. I hit him in the exact same spot and I missed the liver. If we understand physiologically what's happening to these animals as they change positions and they see how the normal body functions of physiology work from an anatomical perspective, it's going to really help you with this understanding to get better shot placement and to kill deer you wouldn't normally would have. So if you take a look at, if we can do both of these doors, the distance between the heart and the liver here, and then to show the distance between the heart and the liver here, how much closer that it is when it's bent down, okay? And again, we know that's because of the result of the stomach pushing the diaphragm forward as it compresses together, okay? Now let's add to that our shoulder bones, our scapula, our glenohumeral joint, our olecranon, and see when that deer comes down, how that is the other factor for you to be able to see of why Gavin didn't hit the heart and he hit the liver, okay? So we start out here, right? What happens is the deer comes up there. As he comes down, we know this joint comes forward and down, and for this leg here, for the deer to go down, this comes up. So if you take a look at this here, where that fits in there, do you see how small your triangle is, your devil's triangle? Do you see how the humerus, this bone, covers up the heart? And I want to show you how close this olecranon is to the liver. Now add to this olecranon meat, add to it fur, and the next thing you know, from where this is at, right here is where Gavin hit it. Now Gavin still hit behind the liver right here, right? But remember, the liver is the farthest forward on the middle of the deer. So when his arrow traveled through it, he didn't hit the liver here. He hit the liver in the middle of the deer because remember, it's sitting in a bowl shape when it's pushed forward. So the bottom part of the liver is more centered or more forward than the rear part of the liver is, which means when he shot in through here, he hit the liver on the very bottom in the middle of the deer, not here. So if you combined, so basically what happened is, when you see this deer down and you use this olecranon or this crease for your reference point, what's happened is this is higher and back farther than it would be on the upright deer. And so that's one factor. Two, the liver is actually pushed farther forward. So if you add both of those, one goes back 3/4 of an inch, another one comes forward an inch. Now you've got an 1 3/4 inch gap that's closer between the liver and the shoulder bone. And when you shoot it, you think you hit it perfect because the illusion is this olecranon, if you take a look where this is here, do you see how that's behind the heart? When it was upright, it was like this. But as the deer comes down, that comes up and that comes back. And so now you can see that illusion there. So it's basically, it's like trick photography, so to speak, except it's not trick photography. It's the reality of when his deer bent down, his olecranon went up and it went back. So if you use this as a shooting point, that's in a different point on this animal bending over than it did over there. So I hope this has helped you understand the difference of a deer feeding and standing up, how that affects the shoulder bones, and how it actually affects the anatomical organs on the inside. So hopefully I've explained it and that'll give you understanding. And the next time you go out, you'll know, I better watch trying to shoot in that devil's triangle like that, because that gets much smaller as they bend over like that.